Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And whatever it says on the front cover, this budget does not build a stronger Canada. It weakens it, piling up record debt, driving up costs, and leaving working Canadians to carry the weight of the Prime Minister's spending and years of Liberal failures. Canadians were told to expect something generational. They were promised a serious plan to restore discipline after a decade of Liberal overspending and inflationary deficits. Instead, they got a banker's budget, one that borrows more, taxes more, and delivers less than ever before. This plan is obsessed with the appearance of stability, but not the reality of affordability. Liberal ministers are celebrating empty promises and vague fiscal targets that exist only on paper. Meanwhile, Canadians are left holding a different kind of paper, real grocery receipts with fewer items and higher prices, and real bank statements that show savings shrinking month after month. I often say, Mr. Speaker, you can't put a AAA credit rating on a hot dog, and you can't buy dinner with a deficit projection either. Behind all the rhetoric, the numbers tell the truth. This is the largest regular deficit in Canadian history, $78 billion, far above the $62 billion the Prime Minister promised just months ago. The debt-to-GDP ratio is rising, not falling. Government spending is up $90 billion over last year. That's $5,400 in new spending for every household in the country. For all that spending, Canadians are not better off. They're falling further behind. Growth has slowed to 1.1%, the second weakest in the G7. Unemployment will average 6.4% over the next 5 years. The gap between rich and poor has widened. Food bank lines are out of control. 700,000 children have visited food banks. Investment is collapsing, housing starts are stalling, and productivity is at its lowest point in decades. Mr. Speaker, this is not building Canada strong. It is building a weaker economy and a heavier burden for the next generation. Clearly, the so-called new Liberal government and this banker Prime Minister have learned nothing from the past decade under Justin Trudeau. Higher spending is not progress. It is not strength. It is the reason families face higher prices, higher taxes, and harder lives every day. Case in point, Mr. Speaker, it is the carbon tax. For years, Conservatives warned that the consumer carbon tax punished families and drove up the cost of living. For years, the Liberals stood in this House and denied it, insisting it somehow made life more affordable. Now, in this very budget, the government brags about canceling the tax. They call it divisive, and they boast that because they did so, gas prices are down and inflation is eased. But in the same plan, they double down with the industrial carbon tax. That tax drives up costs for farmers and home builders and pushes prices higher for everyone else. How much will it cost Canadians? How much misery will it inflict before they admit they were wrong again? You can't tax the things farmers need to grow food and not expect food prices to rise. You can't tax things home builders need to build homes and not expect home prices to climb. Mr. Speaker, we've seen this pattern before. The Liberals finally admit there's a problem, but they turn around and they repeat the same mistakes again. Another example in this budget, they promised to provide more certainty to the marketplace. Yet it's the very opposite of what they are doing for Canadian auto sector. After years of threatening manufacturers with an electric vehicle sales mandate, they've now paused it. Let's kick the can down the road. Let's delay it. Let's review it. And still can't say what comes next. How can automakers plan for the future when Liberal policy changes every few months? The 2028 models are being finalized as we speak, Mr. Speaker. Decisions that shape jobs and investment for years to come. What are the workers at Honda Canada in Alliston supposed to think when the government keeps flirting with a policy that threatens their very livelihood? Especially when the Liberals are failed to defend their industry against the Americans. This is why the slogans in this budget ring hollow. The Liberal failures have driven jobs, investment, and confidence straight out of the country. They shift opportunity abroad instead of creating it right here at home. If they truly wanted to build Canada strong, they would protect Canadian jobs and investment and give consumers a choice by scrapping the EV mandate for good. Today, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has spent months insisting this budget isn't spending, it's investing. We've heard the same line from Justin Trudeau for 10 years, but Canadians know better. And my question would be this, Mr. Speaker. If this were true, the so-called investment, why stop at $280 billion? Why not double it? Why not triple it? If this investment is so great, if every dollar returned more than it cost, there's no reason to ever stop spending. We've already seen the results of these so-called investments. Take Northvolt, the Quebec battery plant. The Liberals poured billions into it. The company went bankrupt, no batteries were built, and taxpayers were left with nothing to show for it. Or Novavax, the $130 million for a vaccine facility that never made a single vaccine. And what about the Canadian Infrastructure Bank? Since 2017, it has approved up to $13.2 billion for 76 projects. Yet, only 2 have been completed. How much of the $280 billion this Liberal government is calling capital investments will yield similar results? After 10 years, it's become apparent that what Liberals call investment is what Canadians call waste. And the evidence of that waste isn't just failed projects, it's the results for ordinary people and the impact the waste has on their communities. After a decade of this so-called investment, our economy is weaker, productivity is falling, and wages are stagnant. And Mr. Speaker, look at page 53 in the budget. The Liberals' own budget admits it. On page 53, they concede that if Canada's productivity growth had simply matched the U.S. since 2017, the median income of a family with a child of 1 would be nearly $11,000 higher. That's the real return on Liberal investing. Less growth, lower incomes, and fewer opportunities for Canadians. It's the same story Canadians have seen for 10 years. A government that mistakes announcements for achievement and spending for process. Canadians are working harder, paying more, getting less in return. They do not need a banker's budget that builds up the debt while they fall further behind. After all, Canada's strength has never come from government expenditures. It comes from the determination of Canadians. The family in Tottenham saving for their first home, the small business in East Gwillimbury growing and succeeding, the farmer in the soup and salad bowl of Canada working 16 hours a day, harvesting carrots to feed this nation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The Parliament Secretary, the Government House Leader.
Yes, so thank you, Mr. Speaker. And there's a number of statements that I would challenge the member on in terms of just how accurate they are. But I think there is a substantial difference between the government and what we're witnessing across the way. We do believe that investing in Canada is the way in which we're going to be able to build a stronger and healthier country, Mr. Speaker. By investing in Canada, we're going to have better roads, bridges, infrastructure that supports a healthier economy, safer communities. This is what it is that the Liberal Party, that this government is working towards, a stronger Canada. On the other hand, we see the Conservatives want to dispose of some of that infrastructure. They're not voting for the budget, Mr. Speaker. They're more interested in having an election than building a healthier Canada. Can the member explain why it is?
The Honourable Member for Newsacum-South-Gwillimbury.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for Winnipeg North for the question. Conservatives are concerned about affordability for Canadians. That's what this budget's all about. We were told by this government in the last campaign, they're going to move at speeds Canadians have never seen before, Mr. Speaker. This is going to be generational. You know, we've got the new major projects office. I stood in this house and asked for the address the other day, the phone number, and the email. Well, that's not set up yet. Now we've got the Build Canada Homes Department. More bureaucracy. Where's the Build Canada Homes office, Mr. Speaker? Well, that's not set up yet. You know, we've heard this song and dance before, Mr. Speaker.
Question commentaire, l'honourable député de Drummond.
The honourable member for Drummond. I think you should leave my colleague a bit more time. It's always entertaining. Often the Liberal budget is criticized as being very conservative, but there are things in the budget. What does he like the best, if it is truly a conservative budget? So the massive increase in defense spending, tax cuts of $28 billion, cuts to the public service, and billions in tax credits for the oil patch. Which of these conservative measures coming from the Liberal government does my conservative friend like the most?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And one conservative measure I can appreciate is the elimination of the carbon tax. You know, Mr. Speaker, we fought in this House for 10 years for the elimination of the carbon tax. And we have the other side, the government side, fighting us every day on that. So that is one conservative measure that I see in the budget that I'm happy that's gone, thanks to Conservatives, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Wellington Halton Hills North.
Mr. Speaker, the government often touts its record on its net debt, but that fails to take into account that Canada is the smallest of the G7 economies, it has the smallest currency of the G7 economies, and it is not a reserve currency like the US dollar or euro. It also fails to take into account subnational debt in this country, which is among some of the highest levels in the OECD, which the federal government backstops. Just 5 years ago, a province hit the debt wall, ran out of money, couldn't pay its doctors and nurses, and couldn't raise a penny on debt capital markets, and the federal government had to bail them out. Would the member comment?
Member for Newsacum-South-Gwillimbury.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for the great question. This is why we're standing here today. We are talking about $80 billion. And so Canadians understand, Mr. Speaker, you know, just to service that debt now, that is more than we spend on health care and unemployment insurance. We would now need a 15% GST just to cover the interest on the debt. It is completely out of control, Mr. Speaker.
We have time for a brief question. The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
The honourable member for Tecumseh-Gwillimbury, I noted his comments about poverty, and I wondered if he'd seen, and it was no surprise if he hasn't seen, it was just released this morning, the new report on the Commissioner for Environment and Sustainable Development, pointing out Canada's off track to meet our sustainable development goals to reduce poverty. The most recent numbers show that since 2020, although we had a drop in poverty during the COVID period, since 2020, the poverty rate has been increasing, up from 6.4% and in 2023 reaching 10.2% and rising. I look for the member's comments.
Member, a brief response.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and that's why I said this budget should have been about affordability for Canadians. And a comment on the environment, Mr. Speaker, and to the member opposite, the $2 billion tree planting is now gone, Mr. Speaker. Another reversal, another broken promise. This budget should have been entitled Broken Promises.